The Hubsan H216a that we bought last year, we flew on an app because it didn't come with a controller. But this mole-like 7.6 volt GPS Hubsan drone flew for about 7 or 8 minutes and captured 720p like most of its predecessors. I'd also bought another drone, a H216a, at the same time with a controller with the same software, but I didn't really rate it much. We flew it a bit and then we ditched the idea of continuing, so I sold it. After reviewing the footage on the memory card, it became clear that this particular drone, the Hubsan H216a, had a much better camera in the 1080p configuration. I had to search one down, so I managed to scour eBay and got this little beauty. It doesn't have a gimbal and it has Wi-Fi camera feed, but it also has an SD card recorder and a 7.6 volt battery like the 507A. Finished in navy blue, unlike its predecessors. It doesn't have the biggest range, but it does have an app that is quite usable and works well with both drones, controller or not. The Hubsan 216A really took me by surprise in retrospect, and I regretted having sold the original version. If you'd have seen a short, sort of mid to late last year, that I entitled A Journey, I actually bought the drone from California, which, unlike Chinese websites, for my own ignorance, I couldn't trace the journey of. I traced this journey right the way across America, right to England when it arrived. And the drone itself and the transportation only cost about £65, which was great. Here we have a flight from around December of 2021.
And it goes off into the sunset.
The weather was quite calm and still. I was able to get the drone out with my son. He hates Hubsan GPS drones, he finds them very boring.
There it is.
But the footage it captured and its flight characteristics made it quite an interesting flight. I mean, for someone who hasn't got over £100 to spend on a GPS drone with a good camera, this is certainly a consideration. No, it doesn't have a gimbal, but it has a controller, unlike a Tello.
Picture taken.
It has a 1080p camera, unlike a Tello. It has the ability to SD card record, unlike a Tello. And unlike its previous counterparts, here, the 502e, it has a 1080p camera. I wanted to film this particular drone, the H502e, as it seems to be the simplest and most uncomplicated guise of this particular range of drones. The GPS facility on the drones is really good for a toy drone. I'm sure many users will agree with that. But virtually everything, bar the 216a, has a 720p camera. Not that that's a bad thing. I mean, here is a Hubsan H502e. Now, it's a bit long in the tooth. These range from about £30 to £50 second hand to around £80 to £120 new, and are becoming rarer and rarer. Again, the SD card recorder's there, the GPS is there, and in this particular model and the H502c, you just simply have the controller, its feedback, the SD card, and the drone to go with. But luckily the GPS works even for a toy drone, and as you can see here from the camera footage, well, it does give a good account of itself. There in the distance you can see a tree line, a motorway, and further on a railway viaduct across what's called Reddish Vale. It's quite faint in the distance with the camera, but it's still visible. The panorama here was to show off its camera skills. Yes, there's no gimbal, so you do get this wobbly footage, but the colours are quite true. They're not mega saturated or overstated. The drone is holding its own because of the GPS that works on these models, and for a toy drone, it's quite an achievement. They're not the most interesting to fly. It's not fly by the seat of your pants FPV stuff by any means, but in terms of the simplicity of some of them, I've yet to find out what the difference is between the 502C and the 502E in terms of performance. That may be in another video. This particular, if you like, clip is there simply to show the difference between the 502E, S, C, and H216a. God, all those numbers reeled off. Can't believe I managed it. In comparison to the H216a, which has the 1080p camera. Now, this particular video has taken about 3, 4, maybe 6 months to put together, simply because of the timing of buying certain drones, getting the footage, and getting the weather to actually fly it without family commitments or, to be honest, in England recently, the wind. But having said that, I've got such a collection of Hubsan plastic, toy, GPS, 720p drones, and one 1080p drone that I can now do what I feel is quite a fair comparison, having flown them all. Are they enjoyable? Yes, whatever your budget. In terms of all of these particular drones, if you can get hold of them, great stuff. SD card recorder, GPS that works, sometimes a bit finicky, especially if you get dirt in the motors. But the improvement here for this particular video is the comparison with every other camera and the 1080p one. Now, it doesn't give as much range as the others probably, because the Wi-Fi has a limitation in terms of the footage you can see on the app. But the camera quality and the colours it produces with its 1080p camera does give this a bit of a worthy mention. I liken myself to someone who used to not want to spend more than about £60-70 on a drone, and if you don't, that's fine. There's plenty out there, and this is certainly one to consider. MJX Bugs stuff, certainly with the brushless series like the Bugs 2 and onwards, they have really, really successful type of motors and stuff, but they don't have the camera quality that this does. If anyone out there has a Bugs 5W onwards with 1080p camera that can produce this kind of colour footage, please show me. Send me links. I've not seen any in the research I've done, so it was quite a surprise when I opened that footage late towards the end of last year, having got rid of the drone, and noticed that, yeah, the Hubsan H216a, God, those numbers are failing me now, does produce a nice 1080p camera image, unlike all the other ones, which are 720p. Has the same features, probably not as much range as I said, but as a consideration, with that SD card recorder and no gimbal, if your budget's limited, yeah, it's a bit of jello in the images here and there, but it's well worth consideration in terms of the images it can capture. It has all sorts of gimmicky follow me's and circle me's and things, which we did try out, but I haven't featured in this. I find them a bit gimmicky and not for me. But capture quality, yeah, quite happy with. With an SD card recorder and a controller, so it's less than a tello, with a 1080p camera in good colour. Yeah, fair play to it. The Hubsan H216a